Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is Boop I Love You Chapter 7, and this one is titled The Outcome. The professor looked from you to your friend, and then back to you again before sighing. Okay, let's get this started then, shall we? Okay, so aside from the overall questionability of this experiment, is no one here going to question the fact that there are absolutely no legal binding documents involved here? Your friend said, her voice going from mellow to sharp in an instant, crossing her arms and scowling at the professor. You and the professor just ignored her, and he got up from his chair and started setting up for the experiment. He walked over to a cabinet nearby and pulled out some vials, needles, and a sterile tray before returning back to speak to you again. Okay, so how this works is, he said, as he walked over to you with the equipment, pulling up a chair and facing you. We'll need to take a blood sample from you, and then we'll endeavour to extract the quirk protein from your blood, potentize it, then re-inject it back into you and see if it prolongs the duration of your quirk. You beamed from ear to ear. Yes, please, that sounds perfect. Okay, could you please tell me a little bit about your quirk and why it is that you wish to extend its duration? He asked as he turned back to the computer on the desk nearby. You glanced at your friend quickly and she looked at you with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Yin, why don't you go ahead and tell us why you would like your quirk duration extended? She asked with a bit of a smug smile pulling at her lips. I want it extended because it would be useful for some of my daily activities, you said, answering the question as vaguely as possible. Oh, is that what it's called? Daily activities? Fun asked sarcastically. Most people would call it stop. You quickly slapped a hand over her mouth and smiled innocently at the professor, who was looking at you both with a confused look on his face. Okay, so useful for daily activity, he reiterated. Mm-hmm. You hummed in a happy closed-lipped smile as you continued to hold your friend's mouth hostage. And what is your quirk? He asked, typing your first answer into the computer. Therianthropy. I'm a shapeshifter, you replied. Ah, yeah, I can see how that would be useful, the professor said. Your friend yanked your hand away from her mouth quickly. Ask her what she could shapeshift into, she said hurriedly, before you covered her mouth again. What can you shapeshift into? The professor asked curiously. A cat, you replied proudly. And that's all? Yep. Okay, he asked. What is useful about being able to stay in cat form for a long time? Your face flushed. Because I'm shy and I want to get from school to home without being seen. That's all. He raised an eyebrow at you and spun in his chair so that he was facing you directly. Yin, I don't like being the one to call somebody out, but I can tell you're not shy. Yes, sometimes you may want to get somewhere without bumping into someone you know, but a shy person would not be turning up to an experiment like this, all bubbly and happy like you are right now, the professor said. Ha! Your friend yelled suddenly, pushing your hand off her mouth. Professor, I've changed my mind about you. You're all right, she said with a laugh. You hung your head as the shame set in. So, Yin, what's the real reason you wish for a quirk duration extension? The professor asked softly. You sighed heavily and got up to leave. Never mind, you said sadly. It's stupid, and you're going to turn me down anyway after hearing it, so I may as well go now. Correct decision, Fan said happily as she jumped off the examination table to follow you. Why don't you tell me and see? The professor said to you. Okay, fine, you snapped. I like this guy and he likes cats, so I've been shapeshifting into a cat so I can spend some time with him. There, happy now? You glared at him, crossing your arms defiantly as your cheeks burned hot with embarrassment. He was a little taken aback at first by your straightforwardness and honest answer, but then smiled softly with a little sympathetic chuckle. Okay, let's get this quirk extended, he said with a kind, gentle smile. Your friend, who had been standing there with a smug smile on her face, hoping to hear the professor tell you that he wasn't going to extend your quirk because of a crush, was now fuming. Wait, you're still going to do the extension for her? She shouted at the professor. Yes, he said bluntly, looking over at her. It's not hurting anyone. It's quite an interesting situation, really. She pursed her lips together and breathed out heavily with annoyance. Yin, the professor said, turning back to you. I do need to warn you that there could be side effects to this experiment, or it could even not work, or work differently than what we're expecting. Is there a possibility of death? You asked. Well, There's always a possibility of death, so we need to disclose that, but in my personal opinion, death in this instance is practically non-existent. The professor replied. You looked at him a moment. Okay, let's do this, he said with a shrug, walking back over to the examination table and hopping up onto it before lying down. Your friend still hadn't said anything, and just silently walked across the room to another chair and sat down in a huff. You lay back, and the professor applied the tourniquet to your arm and asked you to open and close your hand in fist form to pump the vein so he could take a blood sample. After he drew some blood, he placed the vial in a machine and waited for the proteins to separate. Once the proteins had segregated, the professor extracted them in a needle, along with another substance, and readied himself to inject the concoction back into you. Ready? He asked. You nodded silently, freaking out but not wanting to tell him to stop. You winced as he injected the substance into your arm, and you felt a rush go through your system, but you still remained in human form. How do you feel? He asked once he'd finished. Fine, you replied apprehensively. What's supposed to happen? To be honest, I don't know what to expect because we haven't done this type of experiment before, the professor said with a sweat-dropped look on his face. Okay, you replied dubiously. Try using your quirk, he asked. You activated it and immediately turned into your cat form. Whoa, that was definitely faster than normal, you meowed in surprise as you rolled onto your belly and sat up. How do you feel? The professor asked again. Same as usual as I do when I'm a cat, you meowed again. The professor frowned. Yeah, just so you know, she can't speak human, but she can understand you. Her replies will just come out as a meow, your friend said with an annoyed look from her chair. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Stay tuned for the next chapter coming tomorrow. See you then.